Hi, my name is Scott the Miniature Maniac, and today we're creating a hellish landscape. What up, mini family? Trent from Miscast Terrain got in contact with me recently and proposed a little bit of a terrain-off, or as he calls it, a death match. The premise is that both of us will create a piece of terrain that is no larger than 20 centimeters in diameter, is based on the theme of hell, and has to be done on July 10th, starting on July 4th. Make a piece of compelling terrain in 6 days? What could go wrong? Everything can go wrong, you silly little boy. I started with some basic designs. Time to dust off my 6th grade illustration skills. I had a few ideas in my head. Some kind of crooked and rundown tower, maybe a lake of fire next to a mountain, or maybe some kind of demon throne that has people bowing down, offering gifts and crucifixions. Yes, lots of crucifixions. But why rely on my own creativity solely when I can lean on that of the masters? Time for a field trip. I picked up Dante's Divine Comedy, Milton's Paradise Lost, and Virgil's Aeneid. All three of these books have vivid descriptions of hell. So I'll read small snippets from all three books and I'll create a creative keyword or a phrase that summarizes what I read. And then I'll create a fourth and final design that incorporates all three of those keywords. From Inferno, I got the word variety. There are 7 circles of hell, ending all in the city of the devil called Dis, and among all of these there are a great deal of variety. From Paradise Lost, I got thematic contrast. The book is written from the perspective of God and also the devil, so you get a view of the struggle of both sides. Finally, from the Aeneid, I got mythical. Hell is depicted with swamps and braziers of purple fire and has this eerie vibe. So now with these creative keywords, let's make one final design. My final design has a river of blood and rocky crags inspired by the Inferno. It has a stairway that leads somewhere up, and it has more life and it's brighter and more friendly looking than the surrounding area, inspired by the thematic contrast of Paradise Lost. And finally, purple fires erupting from the rocky crags inspired by the Aeneid. I can do this in 6 days, right? No, you can't. Quit while you're ahead. Comparing the 4 designs, I'm absolutely in love with this 4th one. It's not one-dimensional. It has a story and it causes intrigue. It's a lot more interesting than the first ones, which could be described as vanilla hell. You can get inspiration from all kinds of different things. Movie posters, album art, comic books. It comes from everywhere. On your next miniature project or terrain project, I want to challenge you, try to get some inspiration from somewhere that's a little bit out of the box. I've been reading a lot of books about hell recently, and I think it's starting to have an effect on me. Let's get cracking. All the tools and materials I use in this build will be linked in the description below, and they are affiliate links, so I'll get a little commission when you buy products using those links at no extra cost to you. I'm gonna start with a 20 centimeter diameter base made out of MDF. Next, I'm gonna build up my mountain forms with extruded polystyrene. I scuffed up the glue surfaces with a wire brush and then glued them together with this stuff that's foam glue, but especially looks like Elmer's glue as well. I then weighed down these pieces with something heavy. Oh hey look, a cutting mat with my logo on it. I wonder if you can buy these. Once it was dry, I attached them to my base with pins and no glue yet, and cut the foam to match the perimeter of my base with a hot wire cutting tool. I then cut the foam down the middle to make more space for the river and attached it to the base with a 5-minute 2-part epoxy. Okay, form set, let's move on to some details. I went and grabbed a huge rock from my backyard, cleaned it off, and brushed some modeling latex on it in several thick layers. This also took forever to dry. Also, don't get it on your arms. I then peeled them off and cleaned them out and put some plaster of Paris in them. Time to channel my best Luke Towan and smear sculpt mold all over this thing and attach my rock faces and fill any gaps. As this stuff dries, you can smooth it over with water, which will save you a lot of sanding time afterwards. I then sanded it and filled the voids with joint compound. This also can be smoothed out with water. I'm having fun essentially regressing to 2nd grade arts and crafts using my hands for every single step. I also smeared my last remaining ground earth on one side of my diorama to get a nice cracked, dried earth look. I feathered this out at the edges with water to get a variety of crack sizes, the thicker spots being big, deep cracks and the feathered out spots being smaller. While waiting for this stuff to dry, I parallelized my work a bit and started working on the bridge feature by aging some wood. I took some scale lumber and cut it down to 3 centimeters long. Following a diorama sphere guide on Facebook linked below, I cut up the wood with an X-Acto knife, scraped it, and did multiple brown washes until I got the finish that I was after. I then wrapped some string around the end of each board and airbrushed some black wash onto the edges, like the moisture was collecting on the ropes and causing some rot on the wood. There's moisture in hell, right? I then worked on the pillars for the bridge, which were made out of wood doweling that I brought to a point and also weathered in the same way as the wooden planks. One thing that I forgot to mention is that this lovely cake with the jelly in the middle is going to be raffled off to one of my patrons. So if you're interested in winning this thing, you can find a link to my Patreon campaign in the description below. I also glued on dirt and various sized rocks with full strength PVA glue. Time to paint this thing. I started with a black and white undercoat and grabbed a bunch of hellish colors off my shelf and started spraying them on the base kind of randomly. I wasn't even cleaning in between the colors on my airbrush, just kind of mixing and applying to get some random environment. I then applied some brown wash selectively and did a little dry brushing to bring out the detail of the rocks and the dry earth. I wonder what Trent's doing right now.
I've got a lot of work ahead of me, and it is the 8th. I'm not saying I've procrastinated, but I have a little bit.
I got this in the bag.
Okay.
Trent, do you always look this swank when you're building terrain? I began to realize I was running out of time and resin takes a long time to cure. Typically, I like to wait until the very end to pour resin rivers so I don't get any contaminants in it while it dries, but I didn't have that kind of luxury. So I worked on some decapitated heads and some rotten bodies to glue onto the bed of the river before I poured it and then started to dam it up. At first I used just masking tape, but I didn't like how it didn't follow the curvature of the diorama, so I stuck a piece of acetate in between the diorama and the tape. And then I shored up the tape with wood glue on one side and plumber's clear glue on the other side. I didn't know what would peel off nicely, so I experimented. I also didn't have time to go and buy something to use, so I used what I had. I mixed up my resin, which was in Firetex Light, and added some transparent red tint and sealed my fate. At first, I didn't see any leaks, but the real test is long term. So I went to work and worried about it all day long. I came home and found no leaks, and I was pretty happy. To give the resin river more time to cure, I started to install the rope bridge. I pinned in the wooden pillars and wrapped the pillars with rope on both sides with sufficient amount of slack and then glued on my wooden planks. I also added a chain handrail, doing the same kind of technique of wrapping and gluing it with super glue. At this point, I added static grass to add some more variety and I had run out of things to do. The resin had been curing for about 12 hours and it was the last day that I had to work on it, so I had to get the acetate off now. Both of my glue tests failed. They had ripped off portions of my diorama and worse yet, my acetate stuck to the resin. I should have used mold release or something to avoid this issue. So I cut around the edge of the river and left the acetate on. I then used some white putty from Squadron, which dries super fast and can be smoothed with isopropyl alcohol to fill up the voids that came from ripping the tape off. I sanded this a little and painted the edge of the diorama black. Finally, I add some nicks and knacks like signs and more decapitated heads, obviously, and some dry pigments, and this was finished on July 10th at 11:47 p.m. This was a super fun challenge that Miscast Terrain and I did. It pushed me a lot. I was working on it every single morning and every evening for all 6 days and finished it right at the end. Sure, there are issues that I would fix, and sure, my river looks like cranberry juice and not blood, and this whole diorama looks like a cake, and it's not a cake, you shouldn't eat it, but it was a fun experiment and I'm glad I did it. If you haven't already, make sure to go and check out Miscast Terrain's rendition of hell and let us know who did a better job. Obviously, I did better. And also, while you're on Trent's channel, make sure to subscribe. He's an excellent and entertaining creator. Let me know if you liked the video. I've never made terrain on my channel before and I had a lot of fun doing it, even though it was quite a time crunch. If you want to support the channel, I have a merchandise store and also a Patreon campaign. Both things linked in the description below. subscribe or die, and most importantly, don't forget to burn more menards!